Undoubtedly, it is the most famous suspension bridge in the world. An enduring symbol of San Francisco and the golden land of California that lies beyond it. In the face of man-made opposition, in spite of winds, fog, deadly ocean currents, and tides that persuaded many that the bridge couldn't and shouldn't be built, it was built. Defying impossible odds, it stands as a monument to the pioneering spirit in financing, law, engineering, and construction. Its builder, Joseph B. Strauss, was also a poet. A physically small man, standing barely 5 feet tall, he wrote odes to the redwoods and held large and heroic visions. For his graduate thesis, he designed a bridge that would join North America and Asia across the 55-mile Bering Strait, allowing for all the contingencies of ice flows and foul weather. Of the Golden Gate, Strauss wrote, "Every span is something that can't be done until the men in steel helmets have driven their last rivet." Trajan heard it when he conquered the Danube 1800 years ago. Don't be afraid to dream. Strauss was a visionary of yet another kind. He contested the then axiomatic standards of workers' safety, the belief that for every $1 million spent, a life would be lost. He found this grim statistic unacceptable, and once work on the bridge began, he resolved to fight it. The idea for the bridge was first voiced by Joshua Norton, a famous San Francisco eccentric, better known as the Emperor Norton. When he issued his decree in August 1869, everyone thought it was a comical and impossible vision. Among the many plans to span both the San Francisco Bay and the Golden Gate were those unveiled by two railroad tycoons, Charles Crocker and Leland Stanford. The project died a quick death. Years later, the railroad took a slightly different stand. The Southern Pacific Railroad, which controlled the profitable ferry monopoly, ceased its obstruction of Strauss's project only after angry San Franciscans instituted a mass boycott. Before a $35 million bond issue to build the bridge could pass in the Depression era, it needed strong guarantees that local workers would have the first crack at the job. Strauss changed his design from a hybrid cantilever to that of a pure suspension bridge. The design now called for one elegant span with a massive Art Deco configuration. Poet Henry May described it as a curve of soaring steel, graceful and confident over infinity. 1933, in the midst of a depression-racked America, the towering Bering Pier on the sheltered north side is built. The interior cofferdam is pumped dry. Into this is poured a 98 million pound river of concrete. A grinding wheel planes the pier smooth to within 1/32 of an inch, and a thick coat of lead paste reduces this variance to 3/1000ths of an inch. The steel destined to rise above this near-perfect surface has been prefabricated, forged and tested in Bethlehem's foundries in Steelton and Pottstown, Pennsylvania. It is shipped to Philadelphia and loaded onto ships which carry it down the Atlantic coast through the Panama Canal to Alameda, California. The foundation for the South Pier must be laid under 100 feet of fast-moving, turbulent water. A 1,125-foot trestle is constructed out from the shore to encircle the pier site with a permanent 100-foot deep fender. Without question, Strauss later wrote, It was the most difficult engineering feat ever tackled. Thus completed, a freighter smashes through it in a dense fog. Rebuilt, a fierce storm carries it off, destroying 5 fender units and twisting its 50-ton frame into an iron knot. And again, it is rebuilt. The towers are the first visible evidence of the magnificent construction that was to come. The tallest bridge in the world. The bridge's height was its most dramatic element, and Payne and Morrow, working with Strauss, decided that the bridge's grandeur would be greatly enhanced if the height was emphasized. To accomplish this, they designed towers that slimmed as they rose, made up of shafts joined by cross-bracing from the pier to the roadway, and above that, by portal struts, horizontal braces rising 500 feet from the roadway to the tower top. The shafts are made from clusters of hollow cells fashioned from inch-thick plates, each cell measuring 42 inches square and 35 feet high. Each shaft would be formed at its base by a honeycomb of 97 cells. The number of perimeter cells would decrease at intervals as the shafts rose, until only 21 cells remained at the top of the towers. The 4 portal openings would also decrease in dimension with the increasing height, further enhancing the narrowing effect. Strauss was more than pleased with the design. This bridge is perhaps the first in which the importance of a new motif of stepped-off towers has been recognized and applied, he announced jubilantly. The bridge is also the first in which the network of transverse braces between the tower posts is eliminated, and the tower's portal braced throughout, making the tower effect that of a majestic doorway. Specifications for every piece of metal, including the rivets, are computed and standards for strength devised. Flexibility is calculated, allowing the towers to bend 18 inches toward the channel to allow for weather-induced contraction of the cables, and 22 inches toward the shore with expansion. The towers can also move 13 inches in a lateral direction in order to cope with wind stresses. They rise in 3 distinct phases. First, a giant 2-headed derrick, called a traveler, is used to lift the steel into place. Outfitted with 2 separate booms, one servicing each shaft, each boom is capable of lifting 85 tons. The steel is hoisted to the top, where teams of connectors, a man for each junction joint, waits to guide it in place and connect it with temporary bolts. The traveler, a girder work truss, is fitted between the tower shafts and secured with movable beams and pins. Outfitted with cables and pulleys, it was able to crawl up the tower. As each section of steel is raised, crews of bolter-ups fit the pieces together. As all the pieces are aligned, riveting gangs pop the pins and bolts and fill the holes with rods of hot steel. The metal cools to a permanent bond and is rigorously inspected. The North Tower was erected in just under 10 months, taking from August 1933 to May 1934. After a delay of 6 months, work started on the Southern Tower. Having surmounted numerous problems with the tower's underwater foundation, work goes well on the tower itself, an identical design to the Marin Tower. In the spring of 1935, as ironworkers were finishing the tower spire, carpenters set to work building platform decks around the tops of the towers. When the decks were completed, the giant steel saddles weighing 160 tons each were derricked up and put into position for nesting the spun cable. Spanning the gap between the towers would require spinning 80,000 miles of wire out into the air above the sea. A. Roeblings & Sons Company of Trenton, New Jersey, the same firm that built the Brooklyn Bridge, won the contract after fierce bidding. To make the venture profitable, they had to spend 265 tons a day, 4 times what existing methods had ever produced. The 36 3/8-inch cable from which nearly 1 million ton bridge would hang contained 27,572 separate wires bunched into 61 strands. 8 a.m., August 2nd, Fort Point. Battling high winds and a strong tide. A barge unreels 5,000 feet of rope. Lines from the towers are hooked to the rope and pulled to the tower top. 25 lines followed this same route. These formed the foundation of Roebling's catwalk workstation. These footbridges were 15 feet wide and suspended across the channel about 3 feet below the projected line of the main cables. Within days after completion of the footbridges, the cable spinning began. Reeling machines were installed at the anchorages. This process began with 2 spinning wheels per tram to double production, a Roebling innovation. In all prior bridge construction, the tramway had carried the spinning sheaths from anchorage to anchorage and back again. For the Golden Gate, Roebling designed a split tram. Now there were 2 holding carriages for each cable instead of 1, originating at opposite ends of the bridge and meeting at midspan. With the help of an additional wheel added in November, the job is completed in May 1936, 2 months ahead of schedule. The result, 2 massive lengths of cable with an individual tensile strength of 200 million pounds. Wrapped in yet another wire which acts as its skin, the core bundle is protected from the elements indefinitely. Each span expands and contracts like a steel ligament. The following month, stationary derricks at either tower began lifting steel from barges and passing it to traveling derricks which lay the deck from both ends. Bridgemen set to work, connecting and riveting while balancing on 6 to 8-inch girder flanges without handrails or walkways, 22 stories above open water. Spectators marveled at the sight of these men working so high above the channel. The tower swayed severely enough to cause motion sickness. It was bitterly cold. The bridgemen were a unique breed, the heroes of American labor, the bold adventurers of a new age of high steel. Strauss was in awe of them. There's an ancient saying among bridgemen, he said, that the bridge demands its life. Among modern builders, the rule of thumb is 1 life for every $1 million worth of construction. That seems an appalling sacrifice, and one would think it next to impossible to find men to take that risk. But the very reverse is true. Bridgemen are a breed unto themselves, strange migratory birds with an uncanny ability to sense the next big job. There are always more men seeking work than there are jobs, just as there are always more men needed to fight a war. The bridgemen's dauntless efforts see the bridge's joining member placed November 18, 1936. Strauss set out to cheat the fates and the $1 million, one-life price tag. His foremen are given orders to sack any man whose nerves seem tenuous. Doctors prescribe a diet for dizziness and hangovers. Respirator masks are given to those working inside the towers, and goggles are issued to counteract snow blindness from the sun's glare on the low-lying fog bank. Strauss insisted on safety belts and hard hats, cleat-like projections, hand ropes, and wire-release steel planks to prevent the spread of fire on the catwalk. Strauss and Payne also insisted on a safety net below the open deck. 3 months later, a carpenter is knocked off during a gale and becomes the first of 19 men to be saved by the net. And the first member of what became known as the Halfway to Hell Club. Almost 4 years, what amounts to 25 million man-hours, will pass before the first life is lost when a worker is crushed by the falling arm of a derrick. Death and its cold, ominous statistic are not to be cheated. February 14, 1937. 14 men are aboard a traveling scaffold suspended by 4 brackets and wheels slung between the deck. They tear loose the used concrete forms and toss them down into the safety net. Suddenly, the 10-ton scaffold falls into the net. For an instant, the net supports the weight, but the ropes lashing the net to the bridge give way, spilling the men into the sea. Raining debris, the net falls on them. All but 2 perish. None are identified until all of the workers are lined up and their time cards handed in. Metal failure is officially blamed, and new stripping scaffolds are soon in place. The final structural step is the laying of the roadway. All that remains to complete the bridge is a coat of international orange paint. The process of painting the bridge will continue for as long as the bridge exists, year after year, back and forth. At 6 a.m. on May 27, 1937, the barriers fall, and the first of more than 200,000 pedestrians surge through the turnstile. There is such a deluge of nickels that the coin boxes break and water buckets have to be used. The next day, the bridge opens to automobile traffic as President Franklin Delano Roosevelt pushes a telegraph key in the White House. 100 skyrockets from the toll plaza burst into the sky. And every bell, whistle, horn, and siren in the city announced the triumphant opening of the Golden Gate Bridge. Strauss had put the adjusted cost of construction at $27,165,000. It was actually $40,000 less, not counting easement rights, financing, engineering, and administrative fees. That brought the final figure to $1.3 million less than the $35 million bond issue. The bridge, which had developed a replacement cost of $200 million by 1970, not only paid off all of its bonds by 1971, but did so on bridge tolls alone. Joseph Strauss died only 1 year after the bridge was completed. On the bridge's 4th birthday, an 8-foot bronze statue of the engineer was unveiled by his widow. Today it stands near the San Francisco toll booth. Said Strauss when the bridge was completed, "If the entire 4,200-foot span were jammed with loaded limousines standing bumper to bumper in all 6 traffic lanes, if the 10.5-foot sidewalk from both sides were crowded its full length with foot passengers standing shoulder to shoulder, if a 90-mile gale should suddenly press against the huge exposed side of the bridge, and if at that moment someone should saw both cables halfway through, why, the Golden Gate Bridge would stand." A wide variety of vessels representing any number of exotic technologies pass beneath the Golden Gate Bridge today. Faster, more fuel-efficient cars than first made their way across the bridge at its opening hiss along the span. Yet the bridge still captivates all who behold it. In 1937, the bridge was chosen as the most beautiful of steel spans. This is still true today, but more. This structure stands as the actualization of a poet's dreams, a testament to the idea and its consequence.